Before we start this episode, I wanted to tell you that if you're looking for free dog training courses, you can take the Victoria Stilwell Academy's most popular free course, Building Your Dog's Confidence, right now by going to vsdogtrainingacademy.com. That's vsdogtrainingacademy.com. Okay, now on with the podcast. I have been in the trenches with my next guest. And when I'm talking at the trenches, I mean the trenches when it comes to puppy mill rescue. My next guest has worked in rescue in Georgia for many, many years. I met her when she was very young, and I was so impressed about how much older and wiser she seemed than any of us. And I think she was only 13 when I first met her. But this person, she not only talks the talk, she walks the walk. She's a VSPDT, a Victoria Stilwell Positively dog trainer. There's a reason why she is because she's extremely talented at what she does. She's a great educator, not just locally, but also nationally. She deals a lot with very complex dogs and very complex situations. So I'm so excited to welcome to the podcast, Kat Kekel.
Thanks for having me.
So, okay. We first met when I was speaking at a conference, the animal cruelty conference, yes. And I think that's what it was. You had attended. It was by Animal Law Source. And we were speaking, obviously, against animal cruelty and how I think there was law enforcement there. There were a lot of people there that are involved in animal cruelty cases. And it's a conference that every year is organized and run by Claudine Wilkins now for the Georgia Humane Society. And it is something that I think it's in her. She just had a last conference. She's in her 25th year. Anyway, that is where I think we met, Kat.
I think that's where we officially met. Before that, I met you at a different conference and I got a book signed by you. And that was the first time I'd seen you in person, but we didn't have any conversations then.
Okay. Was that at the APDT conference in Atlanta a long time ago?
It was an Atlanta
I was speaking
conference.
There myself. Yeah, I think it was. I think it was Temple Grandin. And then I was there with Temple Grandin, which was in itself just amazing because I had a long time to chat with Temple Grandin. And that is definitely an experience, something that I will always embrace and I will never forget. The mind of this woman is so extraordinary. But maybe that's where we met. Anyway, there's been so many little conferences and big conferences I've spoken at. Anyway, Kat, I think one of the times when we truly bonded, I should say, was when there was a huge puppy mill seizure in Cherokee County. That was when we really were boots on the ground. And that's when I really first saw you doing your work. Still quite a young person, but you doing your work and being so capable in the face of such tragedy. Can you explain what that experience was like for you?
Yeah. So it was the first extra large case, I should say, of 450 moms, whelping puppies, just all sorts of shapes and sizes of dogs as well. We were talking about little tiny, we call them the poodle mixes. There's the Shih Poo or the Chihuahua Poo or something because everything had poodle in it. And then anything from huskies. We had huskies, there was beagles, there was Frenchies, and it was just a lot of different types of dogs, and they were kept in lots of different types of containments. So you're talking rabbit hutches, large fenced-in areas, trailers, some of them. And it was overwhelming as far as the size because we didn't realize how long it was going to take to safely seize, because it was a case, all of these animals and safely bring them back to our facility, which we didn't have the capacity for that many animals to be housed singly. Luckily, these guys were housed together anyways, so we quickly grouped them together as they were already on scene and transported them back. And that number grew from 450 to 500 quickly, because as we were transporting, some of the dogs were giving birth when we got to the shelter. So it was overwhelming, but eye-opening, and something that you will not ever forget because of the impact that it had.
You're right. It was shocking. And I remember, I mean, when you talk about a seizure, it's not just about taking these animals out of their cages, their rabbit hutches, their sometimes some of these animals were housed in just tiny crates, or otherwise they were outside and they had maybe a little bit of food, maybe some water, but they were outside open to the elements, and a lot of them in one run. Every puppy, every breeding dog has to be catalogued and photographed with a specific number and then given a specific tag before it can be taken out. So it has to be photographed in where they are. Then the dog is taken out. It's photographed as it's being taken out. It is vetted very quickly. It's given a number. It's then photographed in front of the number. It's then given a little a paper tag around the neck so that it can be identified. So this whole process is, remember, it's not just taking puppies and dogs out of a scene to get them into rescue. This is a potential crime scene too. And so everything has to be documented so that we can bring charges, if needs be, to this particular person, family that ran this puppy farm/mill. Now, interestingly enough, this is in a rural area. It is, but it's actually off quite a main road. And so I think what has surprised me living in Georgia and working in Georgia and doing a number of seizures is how sometimes visible these establishments are, how lots of people in the community know about it, and also how invisible they are, even if they are just slightly off the road. Because, of course, North Georgia especially, just woods, and woods. And so that's why there's been dogfighting operations, dogfighting busts I've done, as well as these puppy mill seizures. And this particular one, we had to wait. I remember waiting outside with law enforcement and animal control and the shelter and you all, and we all had to wait outside until law enforcement had gone in, until they had made their arrests, and then we could go in. So you're walking into a scene where you have to document everything and you have to be really careful.
Yeah, you do. And that's the part where you have to take your emotions, and you can feel them, but you need to put them aside and go, but I have to do a job. And in order to make the most impact for these animals, because they're getting out one way or another, we're getting them back to the shelter. But we have to take a second and then go, what do we need to do in order to collect the evidence to, like you said, tag everybody and make sure everybody's okay? Because we're also doing a quick triage, if you will, of looking at that animal over when we're pulling them out of the situation. So we know this one looks like it may have an upper respiratory. This one's got a skin condition. So when we get back to the shelter, we're able to then give that animal adequate care immediately. So that's why we have to take our time. And ideally, for those who are not familiar with how court proceedings go, court in general is a very long time. So we may not be going to court in the next week, which usually you're not, but it takes a while. So for people who then have to go up on the stand and testify for those animals, the way we tag it is so that you can take that animal and put it exactly back in your memory where it was on scene with a map and video and pictures. So the defense and the court system can know this is where everybody was, this is how it looked, and the jury is able to really get a full picture. And hopefully then the conviction is more severe because of that.
It is because we did that on a large dogfighting scene that you weren't on. It was in Polk County, and it's the way we documented it with just not pictures but also video was one of the reasons why we got the longest conviction for a felony dogfighting case in the state of Georgia, and actually I think in the nation ever, of this one particular person. So it's so important to document. As much as you're right, you just want to love on these dogs, you want to take them out, you want to rescue them, you want to get them to safety, but it has to be a really well thought out and documented process. Now you get them to the shelter, and look, yes, around 450 dogs, but many of those female dogs, they're pregnant, they are going to give birth. Now you've got a shelter that's full to capacity, but you are welcoming more into your shelter. And, I mean, it's a largest shelter, but it's not huge. And so you have now 450 is turning into over 500 dogs because of these poor pregnant females are now giving birth in much better circumstances, I should say, with much better care and attention because they're in the shelter now. But still, the numbers are growing. And when we're talking about a case, these animals aren't even available for adoption. It's not like you can bring these dogs into a shelter and, hey, in a couple of days after they've been vetted, they can go to homes, because this is your evidence. And so now we've got things like cost of care. Now we've got, is the person who's running the puppy farm, are they going to sign those dogs over? Are they going to be responsible for the payment of those dogs? Because that's another thing. How expensive it is to house all these dogs and take care of them, to feed them, to address their medical needs. So what was that experience like when you had these dogs in the shelter and they just kept growing and growing?
It was long days. So we had really long days. I mean, we were on scene until, I want to say, like 3:00 in the morning. And then we ended up getting back. We were able to go home, shower, change, take a nap, and then come back to work. And that's kind of how it was for the majority of it, because you were taking care of so many. And like you're saying, they are evidence. So we can't do anything with them other than keep them healthy and happy and content at this moment. But we aren't able to do anything other than life-saving procedures. So things like a dental for these little dogs that are going to end up with no teeth in their head after we're done, to spaying and neutering and all of those things that would help, we can't do until we get the final word that they're ours. So yeah, it was long days, and things like sanitary grooms for these little dogs took 2 days to get them all done, because you're just going around shaving and trimming nails on 450 dogs. Some of them worse than others, depending on what condition they were kept in. If they were rabbit hutch dogs, they were more matted than if they were in a pen, ironically, because they were stepping on the wire and their feet would get all smushed. And then you've got those open wounds and things like that. So it was a lot of work, and a lot of us had some not so fun times sleeping on the floor. I mean, we'd be like, well, it's not worth going home. I'll just crawl into one of the offices and take a nap and then get back up and go back out there and do what we needed to do. Thankfully, we had the community outpouring, where we got a ton of donations, and we're able to give these dogs like things like shampoo, right? We have enough for our animals that come in, right? But we weren't expecting such an influx. So things like shampoo, ear cleaner, Q-tips. I think we still have Q-tips from the puppy mill because of how many that got donated, right? I mean, we're talking just an outpouring of outreach, which was phenomenal, because these small things, when somebody would send us a package from Amazon, really, truly, and honestly helped every little bit with these dogs.
It did become a national story, and people in the community and beyond were wonderful when they started donating, and it really was an outpouring of love. Now, 3 weeks later, the animals some of them are ready for adoption. So it didn't take long for them to be signed over to you, did it? And then it's that process of adoption. And I remember coming that morning, I'd come in between as well, but the morning of the adoption, and it was the line to adopt. I've never seen anything so long. And it was like a snake just winding around the shelter and beyond. And it was a real party atmosphere. And again, you have to be careful, though, because these animals have gone through such trauma. You now have to be careful about where they're going to be rehomed. So that's its own beast.
Oh, yeah. Well, and that's one of those things, right? People think, oh, well, I'm taking them and I'm rescuing them and I'm bringing them home. And now my home is perfect and they're going to be great. And they're going to just be the perfect dog, right? Because they're no longer living in that rabbit hutch. When we really need to be talking about the trauma that these dogs have been through and the decompression time that these dogs need to go through and the learning what grass is for the first time. These things are so shocking to them because they've never experienced them before. So that was kind of the real education portion we did have to give every single adopter, that these are not going to be, unfortunately, normal dogs, because a lot of them are the breeding moms. They're not just puppies. Puppies are easy, right? They're going to go live their life and not know anything different. But these parents that have never touched grass before, they don't know what your ice maker sounds like. They're going to be scared from that, right? These small things add up to potential behavior problems, right? I mean, we end up with that male dog who's never been in a house before, who's marking everything. Mr. Peanut that you ended up with for a second.
Mr. Peanut. I ended up fostering Peanut. Gosh, you remember that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Peanut, he was divine in a Chihuahua, and I fostered him. My female Chihuahua at the time wasn't that impressed with me, I have to say, but I wasn't really that impressed with him. But we had to begin with, have a belly band on him because there was no, quote, house training him. We were going to start him on very slowly so that he can learn where to toilet. But he's been in a cage all his life. He's walked on wire all his life. So now he's going to have to get used to grass, patio, wooden flooring, carpet, and can't he just pee wherever he wants? Sure, he can pee wherever he wants. And that's why I was like, okay, buddy, I know that you are gonna need to do this. Plus, he was a marker, so he lifted his leg on everything because that's what he was, and did very well. I think he sired a load of litters. But I had to have a belly band on him to begin with, just so that I can give him time to acclimate just to my environment so that he could be successful. And then eventually he did get adopted. And the woman who adopted him did have some issues with the house training as well and had to continue using the belly band. But slowly and surely, this dog was able to relax. And I think there was a female Chihuahua. And the last thing I heard from her, she sent me a picture of Peanut and this female just lying next to each other on a lovely carpeted floor in front of a sunny window.
Oh, and that's the happy ending that we all want, right? We take them from this one place and they end up happy in a sunny window.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Now, your experience, of course, because you adopted a puppy too, and a very sick one.
Yes, my experience was with Ruggles, is his name, and he's now 10. He was not supposed to live, if we're just going to be honest about it. In that, because we said it's a court case, you cannot let anything go. You cannot humanely euthanize unless it's an absolute necessity. And this particular puppy was in a litter of 3. He was the 3rd. And the mom was trying to just bury him. She was just covering him up. I don't want this one. And we couldn't just let it happen. I happened to be fostering a kitten at the time. And I said, well, we can't let him just die. So I took him, and he was only about 10 days old, but he was so hungry. He was trying to eat, wet food. So fostered him with the kitten. They grew up together for a short period of time. And he started slowly showing those weird anomalies, if you want to say that. He had an open fontanelle, so where his little skull wasn't completely closed, it was soft at the top. He had to wear a little helmet for a little while. He ended up at 6 months having food allergies to everything that you could possibly think of. And just lots of different developmental things that ended up being wrong with him. So yes, the mom was correct in her assumption of, this one's weird, I need to get rid of it, because he is half the size of a normal Shih Tzu, is what he is. He's a little tiny Shih Tzu, and he only weighs about 8 pounds, and his mother was probably about 15. So And depending on what dad was, right? Was he a Shih Tzu? Was it a Lhasa Apso? Who knows? But he was significantly smaller than he's supposed to be. So I said, I'll just keep you until you're happy, and I'll let you live your little life and go with that. And every vet was like, oh, I don't know. He looks a little weird. I don't know if he's going to make it. And I was like, well, if he's happy, I'm going to keep him being happy. But at that point, it had been so long I'd had him, and he finally was just one of those things. I'm like, well, I guess I have to keep you because I can't adopt you out now. No one's going to want you with all your problems. And now 10 years later, here he is, still kicking, still having a good time. He lives on a Squishmallow. That's his dog bed because he prefers that than anything else. I've got 15 dog beds in my house, and he prefers the $50 Squishmallow.
That sounds like Ruggles. That definitely sounds like Ruggles. Wow. Yes. And I mean, it was quite serious, actually. We can laugh about it, but it was quite serious, his issues. But the fact is that you rescued this guy, you nursed him, you nurtured him, and he had a little kitten friend. Of course, we did great video of them, and then that became like a YouTube sensation, a viral YouTube video. But it just highlights the potential issues that these dogs have, even the puppies have when they come from places like this. And it's so many people experience when they get puppies from dodgy parts of the internet or from pet stores where they still sell puppies in pet stores. This is where those puppies come from. Places like this is where those puppies come from. So when you're looking, oh my gosh, the cute puppy, and they're charging $3,000 for a puppy, and you take your puppy home and it's like, oh my gosh, now it's going to cost me so much more in medical bills. I mean, the stories are just right now. It's not, people can say, yeah, but they're so cute and I wanted to rescue this dog. No, you're not. By buying a dog from a pet store, you're just lining the pet store's pockets from the cruelty of what's happened to this dog as it's gone from being born in a puppy mill and transitioned and now being sold at a pet store. And you're buying and continuing the cruelty that is happening to the breeding stock, that's what those animals are seen as, to provide more puppies so that people can get wealthy. It is such a disgusting trade. And Peanut, if he was in another home and people didn't understand his issues, I'm sure he would have gone back into the shelter again, because you can't have a dog peeing all over your house. But because I was able to understand and work with his issues, as frustrating as it was, I'm not going to say, oh, it was so easy. It wasn't. It was frustrating. I don't want to have my house full of pee, but I understood this dog has had no experience of peeing anywhere else, except where he is, except in his tiny little enclosure. Don't get me started about his splayed feet that he has, because he's never walked on grass. He has never walked on solid ground. He has only walked on cages, on just wire. It is so terribly sad. Anyway, so you just the way that you dealt with it, that kind of, not lack of emotion, but that ability to put emotion aside. Now, you've continued to work in rescue. You are a trainer now. And what I would like to talk about after the break, I'd like to talk about what that transition from shelter, when you're transitioning a dog from a shelter to a home, after that 2-week honeymoon period, then maybe within that 2 weeks, things might be hunky-dory as everybody's trying to figure it out. And then, as you say with Ruggles, things start to develop as puppy grows or as adult dog becomes more comfortable in the house. And that's when you begin to see behaviors that might be concerning or challenging. So we'll talk to Kat about that after this break. Are you a dog behavior geek like me? Join me for my absolute favorite weekend of the year, the 2025 Dog Behavior Conference. If you've attended before, you'll know how special the DBC is. And if you've never joined us for this amazing 3-day online event, it's truly a one-of-a-kind gathering of like-minded dog geeks, pet pros, trainers, and animal advocates from all over the world. Registration is now open at dogbehaviorconference.com, and the virtual live conference takes place on April the 4th to the 6th. And discounted early bird seats are on sale now through January. Your registration gives you access to all 3 days of the conference online, as well as the ability to replay all of the presentations and live Q&As from the conference for up to 1 year as much as you like. Our list of speakers for the DBC are truly amazing. Carmelita Uftaheidi, Amber Batson, Irit Bloom, Tom Candy, Sarah Fisher, Andrew Hale, Sindor Pangal, Joe Pay, Julia Robertson, Zazie Todd, Nikki Tudge, and of course, myself. So, reserve your spot today at dogbehaviorconference.com. That's dogbehaviorconference.com. I'll see you there. I'm back with Kat Kekel, and we're talking all things rescue, including puppy mill rescues. Now, when you're transitioning a dog into a home, what are the sort of things that people need to know that they need? And this is not just puppies from puppy mills or dogs from trauma situations. Sometimes dogs come into shelters and they've been abandoned. That is traumatic in itself. Sometimes people have had to do it because they've had to move, or where they're living does not accept dogs. So sometimes family circumstances mean that these dogs, they've grown up in a loving family, but they're now transitioning into a new home because the family can't look after them anymore. So what should people be concerned about, look for, prepare for?
I honestly start with the 3-3-3 rule. So it's 3 days for their cortisol levels to drop and the actual stress to come down. 3 weeks before the animal is more comfortable and you start noticing those things, like you were saying, they're like, oh, I live here. This is kind of the routine. This is where I eat my food. And then 3 months before it is a complete, this is the dog I've adopted. This is who this dog is. And then starting to know, okay, well, then this is something we should work with, or this is just innately that dog. Things to remember are a lot of times we don't have history. We don't know a lot of times if it's a stray or if the owners, when they turned in, didn't give us all the information. Sometimes they're embarrassed because, they've owned this dog for 5 years and it's not housebroken, right? They dealt with that in their own way because maybe it was more of an outside dog or a garage dog. Things like that are sometimes a little bit more difficult. So it doesn't matter where they came from. I always treat them as if they're a blank canvas and we just are learning about who this new being is in my home, and going slow with it, right? Because a lot of times, especially sometimes the trainer in me, right, is like, oh, you're new here and we can teach you how to use the doorbell and we can teach you how to sit and we can teach you how to do all these new fun things. But I have to sometimes take that step back and go, whoa. Many of the ones I fostered and foster failed and ended up keeping are, you have to go at their speed. You have to think of, okay, well, small things. And this is where it is those minute details sometimes. Maybe that dog was used to eating out of a metal food bowl. And every time it ate out of that metal food bowl at the shelter, its collar hit and dinged off the bowl, and that scared him. And now he's in your home and you're feeding out of a plastic bowl. And that's a totally different concept for him because he's used to eating at his home out of a ceramic bowl, right? And you're wondering, why is this dog not eating? This is so weird. He's not, I would get phone calls from the shelter all the time. People are like, he's not eating his food. It's just so odd. What kind of food bowl are you feeding him out of, right? A small detail like that can sometimes be the key to your dog's transitioning into your home better. So starting small, offer lots of different food bowls, lots of different places to rest, multiple water bowls. This is a small thing that a lot of people don't think about, is giving them the opportunity to make a different choice. Because I think that the water bowl should be next to the sink in my kitchen because it's easy for me to fill every day. But I didn't know that this dog actually came from a backyard somewhere and she's never heard the ice maker before. So when the ice maker goes off, when she's getting a drink of water, she's like, well, I'm not ever going to go over there again, right? So small things like that, giving her multiple options to get a drink of water, right, which we take for granted every day, helps that transition. So it's small things like that that I really press on my new adopters of, hey, just go slow. Journal sometimes is really nice. Those first few days, first few weeks, so you can see the change in the dog.
I really like that. So you're saying that it's 3 days for those cortisol levels to come down, 3 weeks for that dog to become comfortable and start to understand the routine, and then 3 months where potentially now you're seeing the personality of that dog really coming out in all its glories and maybe all its challenges. So your job as a trainer in the shelter, as well as doing everything else you do there, you do get to see quite complex cases. And you do work with dogs. And again, I should say you're a VSPDT, you're a positive trainer, but you're working with dogs that have quite challenging issues. Can you tell me a little bit about some of those and some of the challenges you've had?
Yeah, sometimes we get the ones in that are, so the most prominent case I have is a little dog who, his name was Teddy, and he was a little tiny dog, and he was super shut down. He had come from a cruelty case. He hadn't had food or water for 10 days, kept in a crate, and just he was like 10 years old. And everybody thought, oh, he's just so depressed. He's sad. He's just all these things, right? We put that on the dog of what we think that he's feeling. And he ended up just being super, super sick when he first got there. But again, it's a case. So we have to keep him stabilized in order for him to be evidence and figure out what's going to happen in this case. So he ended up feeling a little bit better, and he actually bit our vet tech. And she was like, whoa, I have to get this catheter out of his arm because he's getting fluids, and he's starting to feel better now that he's got fluids on board. Right. And nobody thought, right, because he's a little dog, that he would ever do anything like that. So I said, well, I'll just take him home I'll foster him for a little bit. Turned out he was in kidney failure and heart failure, and he was this case dog that we had to keep alive and happy for a little while. So he slowly but surely, it was the 3-3-3 rule to a T, exactly at those markers. He started being more and more spicy. He had some spicy. He had some things to start coming out. He started with separation anxiety, severe, to the point that he would, if I was not near him, he would start having a full-on panic attack, hyperventilating. And mind you, now this is a dog that has like a grade 4.5 heart murmur out of 5. So if he gets his heart rate up, and he's just going to die. And I'm like, oh no. So luckily for him, I happened to have broken my foot at the time. And so I wore him in a papoose. So I walked around with him in order to cope with his separation anxiety, wearing him. He then ended up
wearing him. Wore him. I love that. I can just see it. Okay.
Oh yes, wearing him like a little baby. He then was like, oh, well, I love you. You are my new mother, and that is it. And you are mine. And so then he moved on to exhibiting more naughty behaviors, couple more weeks. And he bit, I think, every single staff member, including our veterinarian. And you warn people, hey, just don't. He started to become more confident, and he actually would then go after them. So we had to work with him on wearing a little muzzle, so that way he could be safely interacted with, because he was confident, and he wasn't confident in himself. He was confident when he was with me. So when with me, he was like, well, I'll bite him because mom's here. She'll get my back, right? But I had to do a job. I also had to work. And there were times where I had to go down the hallway and adoption counsel and do these other things. And I couldn't be wearing a dog while I'm showing a different dog. So I had to get him to wear that muzzle. And then we had to transition him to be able to be moved to another staff member so they would be able to wear him. And that took time. He ended up passing away fairly quickly after all of that. But that was a really big challenging case because little things that you don't think about. I watched myself change my behavior because at home he also bit my husband. So when I first got him, I could sit on the couch and he could sit next to me and I could sit next to my husband. By the time he passed away, I was sitting across the room in a different chair. And I had no idea that I was changing my behavior to fit the behavior of this dog and make him more comfortable. So he was something that we learned. I learned a lot about and how he's going to be a challenge. So now when I get these cases of these dogs, that it's not going to be easy for that family. We have to have a realistic conversation of management, and they have to have a support system through me of this may not be a normal dog. Is that going to be okay with you? So there are some challenging ones that come up, right? That we just are not even, you don't even see it. Day one, he just looked like a sad dog in a cage. You end up, he's not a sad dog in a cage. He's a very fearful and not confident dog who had some severe emotional problems.
Yeah. But at least he knew with the little life that he had left that he knew love and he knew care. And yes, he needed to continue to feel safe with that love and care, which means nobody could come close to you or wasn't really that interested in anything else. But you had mentioned there about the muzzle. Now, working in rescue, I'm a big supporter of the Muzzle Project. I'm a big supporter of teaching every dog, regardless of where they've come from, whether they're a puppy or an adult, to wear a muzzle. I think muzzles advocate for dogs. I think they keep them safe. And I think in certain rescue situations, they prevent them from being euthanized, because that's the dog's only defense mechanism is their teeth. And sometimes if they're in pain or if they're discomfort or in their abject fear, they're going to use those teeth. And then that might be an expression that goes, oh, that works. I'm going to do it again because that works. It's not necessarily because I'm confident, as you said, but that works and I'm going to do it. Now the dog is safe. Everybody around them is safe. You are preventing a bite history by teaching your dog to wear a muzzle, because even if your dog is that most well-adjusted, confident dog and you got it from a breeder or you got it from a shelter and the dog is completely almost bomb-proof, but something happens and your dog is in pain and you take your dog to the vet and then the vet needs to put a muzzle on. The dog's never experienced having a muzzle put on ever. And so that is a really terrifying feeling to have that only method of your defense taken away from you. Think about what it would be like to have somebody just, well, put your arms behind your back and that's it. You can't use them to defend yourself. Like, what are you going to do? It's really destabilizing and disempowering. So muzzles do help protect our dogs.
Absolutely. And with him, he changed his, I feel like it changed his interaction with more people. So he was able to safely, he wore the muzzle because he was happy about it. He liked it. He was like, this is great. I love it. We're having a great time. And so when we were introducing him and transitioning him to be able to be worn by another staff member, he wasn't able to make contact and we were able to go slower because we weren't also having that fear of the other person that, oh, I'm going to get bit when we were transitioning. And that was really, really helpful for him. He was able to see a confident person interacting with him because there was that safety in play.
Yeah. You are, as a trainer, and I mean, this is just even away from the shelter work that you do or the transitioning work that you do, but you as a trainer are a big supporter of, it's not just teaching a dog to sit, stay, and do all of that, but it's understanding the emotional journey of these dogs and helping people understand that it's not just, you can't just take a dog and you're going to train it and then that dog is going to be fine. I still think that people think, oh, this dog just needs to have training, or this dog needs to go away to be trained by somebody else so I can get a turnkey dog when it comes back to me. I think that really is a mindset along with a lot of people. I just need to get this dog trained and then it'll be fine. We know very different. It's the general public that don't. So in your experience, if you had a message to give to somebody or advice to give to a client, what would it be?
What I normally say is take your idea of training and throw it out the window, because it's not teaching them things. Most training is, air quotations there, is actually living your day-to-day life with your dog and building a relationship with them, because that does so much more than actually teaching them, here, you know how to sit. Okay. Well, how does that help me when I'm trying to get my dog to come, or trying to get my dog to enjoy going out and being put on a harness, or enjoy doing these things? They're not enjoying those things. We sometimes treat our dogs like little robots, and it's just not realistic, because I want my dog to have agency. I want my dog to have a personality. I want my dog to be able to choose if they want to participate in training, if they want to participate in this life partnership that we've built together. And I think that's much more enjoyable for both of us, because if you think about it in our traditional training sense, training is maybe 5 minutes a week with your dog, but you're living with your dog every day. You're living with your dog every day. And so that should be what you focus on, is that relationship, those choices, that bond with your dog, because that's going to give you so much more. I recently adopted a dog. She's now turned a year old. I have not taught her anything, really. We live our day-to-day life, but I can call her from chasing off of a deer and come running back to me, not because I taught her a cue, not because I trained her, but because she goes, Mom's calling me. I wonder what we're going to do. I wonder what's going to be happening. And she's excited just for me to call her name. The excitement I see in her face, and her little face brightens up if I call her name, is beautiful. And I would take that over teaching her how to sit.
That is why we love you, Kat. And that is why we're so very grateful for all of the work that you have done to advocate for animals, not just in your state, but all over the United States and beyond, with the education that you're continuing to do. I know that I'd had you on a podcast during the pandemic. I remember coming up and we'd fostering some kittens during the pandemic. And I think we did a podcast outside. I don't really remember. Did we? I think so. No, we recorded something outside. And there you were, just even through that pandemic, going to the shelter every day and making sure that the animals were safe. And it's people like you that work in a really difficult industry, for all the staff that work in rescue in any country in the world, and for everybody who volunteers. I just want to say a huge thank you. If you had, I'll put you on the spot here, 3 things that you would like every dog lover to know, what would those 3 things be?
I would say be grateful for the time that you have with your dog, because they appreciate it more than you'll ever know. Focus on the bond with your dog, because like I said, that's something that we take for granted. We really do. We take it for granted. And then give your dog some grace. Give them the benefit of the doubt, because we're taking these little, for all intents and purposes, aliens, and bringing them into our house, and we're expecting them to know all of these things. And just give them a break, because like you said with Peanut, why can't I just pee right here? Why can't I just have that happen? Because I'm a dog, and that seems like perfectly fine. I don't know that this carpet is special.
Yeah, no, and I thank you. I definitely could not. Who could ever even get angry with Peanut? He was called Peanut because that's what he looked like. He looked like a peanut. And Oh my gosh. It is so wonderful. I mean, you've got the really difficult side of rescue, and then you've got the really wonderful side of rescue when they go to their forever homes and they stay in their forever homes, and people keep sending you photographs. They send you photographs and videos of these dogs being successful and just loving and being safe. And wow, if that doesn't keep you wanting to do the work you do, then I don't know what will. We all need positive reinforcement, and that's mine.
Absolutely. I agree.
Thank you, Kat, so much for coming on this podcast. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me. It was fun.
And that's it, guys, for another Positively podcast. Thank you so much for joining us, and I'll see you on another podcast. Take care.
Thanks for tuning in to Victoria Stilwell's Positively podcast. For Victoria's online dog training courses, more information, and helpful dog training tips, visit Victoria's official website at positively.com. Get connected on Facebook, Instagram, and other social media as Victoria Stilwell, and follow her on Twitter at Victoria S. Learn to become a professional dog trainer with the Victoria Stilwell Academy at vsdogtrainingacademy.com. And be sure to tune in next time as Victoria helps you and your dog live your best life together, positively.